Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Greetings, everyone.
Hello.
It's always the pleasure to see you all. And I hope you've had a good couple of weeks since we've last seen you, or whenever it's been since we last saw you. Um, let's see. Is there any announcements before we get started from anybody? One thing I want to point out is Andy Estep he put on the chat a link to his site. He was here a couple of weeks ago doing an op sessions, and he left a short video on there of his experience, which is kind of cool. Let's see. Anybody going up to Amherst in January for the big meet? DC? Dan? Andy? Good. I'm going too. Cool. Good, good. That should be fun. We ought to stay in touch and see if we can rendezvous or what have you. Okay, so with that, we have our esteemed Charles Taylor, retired MD, doing a presentation on an operations. It's interesting to watch Charlie's work because you can imagine the skilled surgeon he was,
Mm-hmm.
the quality of the structures that he makes. I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you. So Charlie, with that, thanks so much, and I'm turning it over to you.
All right, thanks, Tom. I'll try to go to share screen.
It worked perfectly earlier today, gentlemen, just so that you know.
Don't put the curse on us.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Almost there. Oh, baby. All right, y'all seen a first slide?
Well done.
Charleston.
Nice.
Good. Okay. All right. These are the things I've been working on, say, for about the past 6 months, and I call this the briar patch. You know, my railroad room, like Brer Rabbit does not want to be thrown back in there, ha ha, sort of thing. But the main thing we've been working on down here are these babies, and this is Thomas on the left and Reed on the right, and they're the first twins in either family, and and they have 4 brothers and sisters in that family, and so my wife and I we've been chained to the table taking care of these little guys, but they are hysterical. It's really miraculous to see twins.
Well, I am certainly honored that you named him Thomas.
That's right.
Thank you, Darlie.
Mhm.
I didn't realize they knew me so well at your home, but you probably talk about me a lot anyway.
Well, it's either you or Saint Thomas. I'm not sure, Tom, on that. And then the reed is named after the reed of God. So,
oh wow, nice.
It's kind of fun.
So you are working with locomotives, right, Charles? Because those things don't stop or slow down.
So I was going to talk about the kind of major revisions and the completions on the Memphis and Charleston Railroad. And so some of y'all know, but the Memphis and Charleston really ran from Memphis to Chattanooga. And Memphis was the western headquarter, and actually Huntsville, Alabama was the eastern headquarter. And then prior to 2010, I was anticipating this nice train room, and I had designed it in HO scale. And I went from Alexandria, Virginia to Memphis, Tennessee, and from Nashville to Mobile. And I had it all drawn up. And then Dave Schneider kept coming out with these locomotives, and I threw up my hands and switched to O scale, still in the design phase, 2010. Another thing I learned from experience was to eliminate the S curves. And I'd read it in several books, and certainly Armstrong's book. But early on, I was running locomotives only, and I didn't have a problem with S curves. We're going to talk about that. And so that was a hard revision where I had track already ballasted, not so bad where I had it just kind of provisionally laid. And then the decision to go with turntables and roundhouses, I'd always wanted that, but thought it would be too hard. And actually driving down to the Marietta conference that we had, you know, one of the early conferences, I stopped in Huntsville at the Huntsville Museum of Transportation and met the historian Kenneth Carpenter. And a couple of years later, after I'd been there, he sent me a map, and I'm going to show you that. And then another cause for not really a revision, but a completion. I really had nothing in mind for the entire south end of my train room. And then at the Chattanooga convention, thanks to Mark Brainerd, I learned about the Summit Tunnel on the Memphis and Charleston, Nashville, and Chattanooga. And we'll talk about that. And actually the year following that last big input from Brainerd, I call that my golden year. And that was the year leading up to the first conference here in Memphis. And I probably got more done that year than any other year. However, this past year or so has been fairly productive. On the S curves, it's not a locomotive problem usually, but it is a train problem. And coupled cars will buck one another. And I just noticed this while I was driving trains one day, that, you know, one set of wheels is literally lifted off the track. It doesn't always cause a derailment, but I mean, sometimes it did. And so this is my Chattanooga Peninsula. If you've been able to draw an S curve or to make an S curve, you necessarily can solve that. In other words, you use a little less of the curve on each end, and you want to interpose a section of straight track slightly longer than your longest car. And then that took care of that. So I think I had 5 S curves about the layout, and I had to go after every one of those. And this is Jim Ogden, the Ranger, and Mark Brainerd. That was a fantastic conference we had, and they gave a great day's worth of activity. That Saturday, we got back to the hotel about 3:30 or 4, and I mean, we had walked all over God's Green Acre, and most of us had our feet up. And Brainerd said, "Who wants to see the Summit Tunnel?" And I'd read about another tunnel, but I'd never seen it. And so I was the only one who went out there with them. But this is one of the few existing Civil War structures around Chattanooga. The tunnel is 300 feet long. It's still completely intact. These are the modern rails beside it. And so, you know, 100 years later, they just took bulldozers and made a double track. But this is looking down the barrel of that 300-foot tunnel. And when so that in that next year, getting ready for the group coming to Memphis, I carved a tunnel, the Summit Tunnel. So that was kind of not a revision, but a good completion. And then, so Kenneth Carpenter, 2 years after I visited him, sent me a map of Huntsville in 1861. And it has got every inch of track in Huntsville. I mean, it's a reason for doing Huntsville, is that you've got it all. And I was able to duplicate it, short one siding up here between the passenger depot and the freight depot. So I have 2. I have main track and one siding, and the original had another siding. But anyway, the rest. And so I said, I need to go ahead and do the roundhouses. You know, here I've got the map of it, and I ought to be able to do it. And so I'll show you some steps it takes. So I redrew my track plan. And this is how it is now, but you know, so forget about over here to your right. That's the tunnel that I did later. But so I got a Memphis turntable, and each of the roundhouses were 11 stall roundhouses. You can tell in the photograph, there are only a couple photographs, but one of Memphis and one in Huntsville clearly show the 11 stacks. And so I committed to doing it. I think if I were to do it again, I might back off and maybe make a 6 stall or something like that. But I went for the, the full tilt boogie on this thing. So this is the first thing I had. So I'd already laid track in Memphis and Huntsville. And so I had to pull all the track up. I had to salvage what plywood I could, but I needed to end up with an intact piece of plywood to cut my turntable pit in. I mean, you don't want that taking place over 2 pieces of wood. So I tried to salvage the decking that I could, so I could do an intact pit. And this is actually the Huntsville Peninsula. And the thing to notice, these here you see my cursor? Y'all see
Yes,
it?
sir.
Okay. So here's a lead and here's a second lead. And this is actually a lead coming through the roundhouse. So it's these 3 leads, and that's from the map. Kind of determines the center of that turntable. And here's kind of another view of the same. But what I did for each of the turntables, I took some poster board, kind of heavy poster board, and took a protractor and really laid this out very accurately. And then left these 3 limbs protruding from the disc here, are exactly 1.25 inches across, and they lay right between the rails. And so this kind of helps me to slowly close in on that true center of rotation. And so you have to address all the leads. Matthew tells you no one can serve 2 masters, but when you put a turntable in, you may have several masters that you got to satisfy. Now, we used a Geneva motion mechanism, and once we locate the center of a rotation and satisfy these leads, we actually use the Geneva motion to tell us where the next track will be for the stall. All right, so once we salvaged the plywood, cut our hole, I had to redo the frame of the table to adequate support the turntable pit and the roundhouse. And here I had cross members every, looks like 18 inches or something, but I had to just kind of frame in a little support box for the turntable there in Huntsville. And we used a router with a jig to cut our perfect circle in the plywood. All right, so my brother Harold made the Geneva motion. If you, when I was a kid, we had an HO, Atlas made a turntable, about 10 or 11 inches in diameter. And it was a hand crank thing. And it also is a Geneva motion. It's a common mechanism to move you from one station to another station and exactly locate you. And so we got the leads satisfied. We started installing the tracks, and we did a 30 thousandths gap, at the turntable. And here's just kind of a movie of the Geneva mechanism. So this bridge that's turning right now is a temporary aluminum bridge while we're making the brass bridge. So the other way to do that is with servos or stepping motor, but this is all, I'm gonna say simple mechanical, but Geneva thing's pretty elegant. So a year ago or so, I had to fess up that so my good friend Charlie Curo said he'd had enough of railroading, and this is the Memphis roundhouse here, and he had built the brick walls and the trusses, the horizontal beams that connect trusses are called purlins, and so is at this state. And I wanted to finish. Some of the family here and some of the friends say, "Oh, I like being able to see in there," but honestly, it's 7 square feet of layout that's unfinished. And so I said, I need to finish this thing. So this is my brother Harold. Some of y'all met him before, and he really helps me out. Be able to use some of his machines and then use some of his hand tools for sure. This is the existing Huntsville roundhouse that Charlie Curo had finished. And so it's overlapping metal tiles. Now I wanted to improve some things. I mean, I think it's killer what he did. And, I love Charlie and his work. I wanted to kind of improve the gable, not the gable, I'm sorry, the crest. And he put the gutter tiles on top of the roof on the concave part of the turntable. They should be underneath those tiles. And so I wanted to, correct some things and dress up some things, but hopefully do it as well as he had. So each course of tiles overlaps in this case, about 1/10 of an inch. And on the right, that's the truss frame. These purlins went from truss to truss, and he had mounted the smoke boxes, smoke hoods on the underside of the purlins. And then eventually he had to drill a smokestack hole, nicely lined up on the roof panel and into the smoke hood. It scared me a little bit to be able to line those things up. So I changed things up somewhat, and you'll see that in a second. So this is my original schematic on the left to mount it on the purlins. And when it came my time to do it, I bailed out on that. But on the right is the Huntsville roundhouse that Curo finished, and he did a nice job of lining up the smokestack into the smoke hoods. He lined the underside with paper that looked like wood, and I'm wondering if they laid these metal tiles on wood, or they probably left them raw metal. I mean, that's the whole point, so the thing wouldn't burn down with all these locomotives going in and out. All right, this is the die that puts 2 little kind of V-shape or semi-cylindrical creases in each roof tile. So the roof tile for O is 1.5 inches long, inch wide, and then you press these 2 pieces together, and you end up with that tile you see on the right. That's been weathered, but and the other thing you can do is you can unscrew one of the sides. We just used copper plate. It wasn't very elegant, but it worked. You can unscrew a side and do a slightly fatter piece or wider piece that you can come back and trim. And so we had to do that a bunch because each of these roof panels is trapezoidal shaped, and the edge is constantly changing dimension. So that let us kind of adjust. And this is the shear in Harold's shop, where I cut these strips, and the strips are 0.008 inch thick. They're steel, but they're coated with tin. Some of the early railroad models were called tin types, and they were made of this stuff. It's nice because you can solder if you wanted to. And then I had a little arbor press already, and I used that to to squeeze the tiles. Now, I don't think I show it, but you need to use I use a piece of 3/4 inch thick aluminum above and below the die to really kind of distribute the load on that oak, so we wouldn't split it. Now, like I said, Kiro did a nice job on the frame, but each, so there are 22 roof panels. There are 11 on the salad bowl, side, and 11 on the convex side. And each of them was slightly different. So I couldn't just cut 11 of these and 11 of those.
Right.
So I kind of had to do a lot of hand fitting. So I decided on how much overhang I wanted for the roof panel. And then I had this fascia trim. And then I had the metal tiles overhanging that. And so here I am kind of working things up. And so here's the Memphis roundhouse now with all the provisional roof panels and literally just thumbtacked in place. And that was really very handy. I could take one off, I could sand it down a little more, put it back, and it worked well. And then this is what I'm doing on each of the convex roof panels is I'm gluing that smoke hood underneath. And so I maintain clearance that will avoid the purlins. We'll see another picture of that. So this is on the left is looking at the inside of the Memphis roundhouse now with one of the roof panels kind of provisionally in place. And so rather than doing the wood paper inside, I just wanted to make it look approximately the same color of the roof tile from below. And I think that's probably what they did. And so I just took a picture of the roof, and there's a Benjamin Moore app. I think somebody else has got an app where you can kind of click on a spot on there and it'll give you a color. And they will send you I forgot 2 ounce or 4 ounce paint sample for about $4 or something. And that's enough to paint a couple of buildings. So it's a great way to get a custom color. And that's what I did from the side. Here I am painting the smoke hoods. I didn't realize that there are some gloss blacks out there, but I think the first coat was gloss black, and then I came back with a dull black. All right, and for time being, until I do the Nashville Peninsula, we got a ping pong table in the train room. And so I put a bench, a dead center in one of the ends of the ping pong table and shimmed up so it completely supported the ping pong table. I wasn't getting ready to just wipe that thing out with my project. I'll show you what we did. We took the jig, the initial construction jig for the 11 stall roundhouses.
Wow.
And I put it, and that, well, that's what we did. I think if you're doing 2, you definitely ought to do the jig. If you're just doing 1, maybe you don't need it, but it certainly helped us. And then I made a Lazy Susan and attached this to the Lazy Susan because there are 1,300 roof tiles. And so you'll be all over this thing, gluing and screwing and whatnot. And so I just got a cheapo Lazy Susan from Amazon and mounted it. And I tell you, it saved my life. This thing's big. Like I said, it's as big as a coffin, just about. It's all right. And then the structure is actually not very strong in torsion because those purlins, you just get, it's kind of a half lap joint at each truss. It's not very strong. And so we made this fixture to, support it evenly when we moved it. And so now we're on the Memphis Peninsula, and I'm getting ready I've already cut my roof panels, and I'm getting ready to move this to the Lazy Susan. Oh, and here it is on the Lazy Susan with call it the Sky Crane. I'd intended to mount the roof panels with small wood screw, but I started splitting the purlins. I mean, like first three I tried split, even though I drilled adequate pilot hole. It's 1/8 inch walnut, and it's kind of brittle sometimes. So I ended up drilling and tapping and using 440 flathead machine screws. I think, yeah, 1/4 inch. So the roof panels, 1/8 inch, aircraft plywood, and then the purlin is usually about 1/8 inch. And so I did use 10 or 12 screws on the convex side, and about 8 or 9 screws on the concave panels, are a little bit smaller.
And you did that for each panel?
Yeah, yeah.
Man, you have crossed over, man.
Well, you can't get a clamp in there. You got that brick wall in the back.
Yeah.
You can't reach in, and you can't reach in from the top because of the purlins on the concave face. So anyway, I glued and screwed, and it worked. And obviously, before I did that, I drilled the holes with a jig. So a lot of the buildings, I do a rise to run of 1 to 2, and so it's a 26 1/4 degree roof, and I made a jig to hold the panels at that 26 degrees to drill the hole through the roof panel into the block of wood that was part of the smoke hood.
Charlie, quick question.
Yeah.
The white trim, is that just trim to extend the roof, or is that gutters, or?
Yeah, no, it's the fascia. All right, now here. So I've painted the other side that kind of average color of, believe it or not, of the metal shingles. And then I slide it into place, and then I'd put my screws in here. Yeah, and so there are 26 pieces. It's dollhouse trim. It's kind of a cove mold, and every joint is a compound angle. And I had made a little jig to do those things too. And the best way I found to attach the trim was just with painter's tape, and it did great. And so here I started on the concave side. All right, and then so I'd done that for the couple of weeks leading up to our convention, and this is the convention we just had. This is just a picture there, first place that we visited,
Ellicott City.
Yeah, Ellicott. And so that time-wise, it tells you where I was. Then when I got back, it was time, rubber meets the road. I had to get into those shingles. And so I would cut the shingles, stamp the shingles, then you have to degrease them. And the trouble is, each one is almost identical to the next. And if they start stacking on you, the etchant won't get in between the shingles, and actually the soapy water won't either. And so this is a little paint shaker that I already had, and I just made this plywood frame, and I could use Ziploc containers that you can, just get at the store. And I would, agitate about 20 to 25 at a time, just a little Dawn dishwasher detergent and some hot water. And it just stays put. The little rubber band kind of keeps the thing from going. And this is the business. It's called ferric chloride, and it's a common etchant used for PC boards and whatnot. And I came up with using about 15 minutes worth in the ferric chloride to etch these things. And then I would rinse them, and I'll show you some more things I do with that. The other thing I wanted to do while the roundhouses were off is I wanted to get a better color on the roundhouse floor. You know, I had just kind of the layout earth color, and I wanted it to be more like a wood color. And when we visited Savannah, and I've since found this in other industry, the floors were actually ingrain wooden beams. And so they cut like an 18-inch length, almost like a railroad tie, and just pile drive these things in. That was the floor. And so they kind of probably looked brown when they went in. They're probably black 100 years later when we saw them, but so that's the color. Unfortunately, I'd already laid all these tracks and cemented them in place. So I had to take a tiny little paintbrush and paint between every tie on both roundhouse floors. And some of them can only be reached by the topside creeper. And if y'all have ever spent any quality time on one of those things, it's pain. But so I wanted to paint the floors, and I wanted to do the last 6-inch ballasting between the pit and the roundhouse. And so that's what this picture shows. So after the metal tiles were in the etchant for about 15 minutes, I'd rinse them, and then I'd let them soak in just about a 1/2 inch of water. And then I'd transfer them to just a cardboard carton. And sometimes I'd spray water on them and let them rust one more time. But they just developed this beautiful patina, you know, greens and grays, you know, sometimes black. And then sometimes it goes crazy Ivan, like this guy here. Oh, you can see that. And I think that's what you get sometimes if these things stack on each other. I mean, they just almost covalent bonded because the fit is so intimate. That's why you can't put 1,000 in there and shake them. You got to do batches of about 20 or 25. But so the first tiles to be laid are the gutter tiles on the concave part of the roundhouse. So I put all those in. Once those are in place, then I come over that with the courses on both faces. And again, using the Lazy Susan, I could go from one side to the other. And I used a boatload of gel thickness super glue, tight bond. Yeah. And it seems to be working. I think it's going to work well. It sounds solid and feels solid. So there's 7 courses, and I tried to adjust the height of each course so there's the same amount of overlap all the way up, just to improve the look a little bit over the first one that we did. And here's just another aerial view. Now the trouble is, there are 22 roof panels, and at each end of each course of each panel is a tile that's got a sloped edge. So each course has got 44 special tiles, and so I got a little metal scribe. I knew I was going to need it. I got it. It was only a few dollars, but I bought a metal scribe. And after I cut each piece, And I used 10 snips, and that worked perfectly to cut each of these special edges. And I'd mark the piece, and then because there's no way you could tell the difference between 44 of them without marking them. But here you can see, and I took a ticket punch, like a conductor might have, a ticket puncher to punch the holes in a dead center in these tiles for the smokestack, and it worked perfectly. And here it is with the last tile in place, and it was one of these ridge runners. And again, when y'all come to Memphis, hopefully soon, October, if you want, you can see it closer up. But it really turned out nicely. I like the gutter tiles below the face tiles, and I like the ridge better. The other thing I wanted to do, and last time we were discussing that how important say the roundhouses were, and David was talking about, at each end, this is where you not just turn the locomotive around, but you get it ready for the next run and whatnot. And so that's going to be a large part of the operations, hopefully, on the Memphis and Charleston, is having a hostler, putting the locomotives up, turn them around and whatnot. And so you got to be able to see what you got in there. And especially once I put the roof on, it's dark. And so I devised a way to put some interior lights in, and I'll show you some more. On the Memphis roundhouse, I put 10 LEDs, look like lampposts, but they're in the same plane as the trusses, and they're painted wood color. And so you don't even see them. So here's all 10 kind of on a night shot before I put the roundhouse back. And this, Brother Harold helping me lift this thing. Eventually I'd do this by myself, but early on I was a little scared. And my wife Ginger is taking the photograph. And here it is in place with the final ballasting, the lights, and the new floor color. And that's an aerial shot of the Memphis roundhouse on the right. We use a little piece of grommet. We split a grommet in half and trimmed it to make it look like flashing for the chimneys. And I took a little piece of lucite and cut that 22-degree bevel on it so I could press completely on this rubber gasket because I got super glue all over that thing, and I could imagine having my hand still attached to this roof right there.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the Memphis roundhouse in place, and that's another shot from the Memphis and Ohio terminal. So the patina really looks, I think it looks great. All right, so then I like the light so much in Memphis, plus I needed to do the rest of my ballasting. I pulled the Huntsville roundhouse up again using the sky crane. And rather than just 10 lights, I decided to do 20. And so it'd be 2 lights per truss, if you will, for the 10 trusses between the 11 tracks. And there's a lot going on underneath the table. You can't just put them where you want them. So I kind of had 3 positions, kind of an A position. My favorite would be about right here as far as lighting the locomotive. And then a B would be up a little further towards the opening, and C would be in the back. And all right, this is Huntsville from below, and all the wiring you see is just the wiring to the 11 stall tracks and the 2 or 3 other tracks around it. This is the Geneva mechanism right here. And then I don't know if you can see these kind of black wires here. These are just little pieces of wire I stuck down through my drill holes to let me know where the lights were when I crawled underneath the table. All right. And I spent some quality time on the table. And so I drilled my holes, painted between the ties, and also did the ballasting between the edge of the pit and the roundhouse that I'd put off for 10 years. These are the light poles. I bought some 1/4 inch aluminum tubing. I think it's from K&S, and they come in foot lengths. And so we cut them in half, deburred them, painted it brown, to kind of match the trusses. And then I found a 5mm LED that had a 14-inch lead on it. And so, but the tube, the post is 6 inches. So, you've only got 8 inches to get where you're going. And what I found is that you really can't feed more than 3 or 4 of these from one location. So I had several, I had a terminal block every 3 to 4 lights. And then a neat little thing I found is from these robot kits. It's a wheel hub for these little robot cars. And so the axle, it's drilled for 1/4 inch. It has a set screw, so I can adjust the height of the light in the roundhouse. And then these little holes are drilled and tapped, but I use just a small wood screw through the hole. I didn't really utilize those threads. I mean, you could get it from above with a machine screw, but that's just too much sugar for a nickel, even for me. So, and then I would just take a daub of this, Loctite silicone sealer and just kind of fix the wires in place, let that dry overnight. And then they're ready to be placed. So this is Huntsville with 20 lights in place, and the floor's been painted, the ballasting's been done. And this is what it looks like from below. In this situation, I've got, my panel over here is in the way, but I've got at least 3 different lights coming off this one terminal connector. These are real nice terminal connectors. They work pretty well. All right, and then while I was at it, I went ahead and added 10 lights inside the car shop at Huntsville. And again, the car shop, the machine shop, this is the footprint of the machine shop. Hopefully I'll get that done before the group gets here. But everything else is just per that map. All right, and so here's the Huntsville roundhouse back in place. I've done more ballasting. And here's the shot. And so
Oh, wow.
you can clearly see, so I have 20 locomotives, and I plan to primarily be dispatched from the roundhouses. And so, you're going to have 6 to 8 locomotives in each roundhouse, and you really got to be able to see who's who in there. It's probably going to generate I'm going to have a kind of a roundhouse car list, if you will. Each locomotive will have a spot at the roundhouse, but hopefully I can work that out. And that's it for tonight for me.
Wow. Charlie, Jesus.
Wow.
That's a great shot, man. I love the dull lighting back in there. And I presume you're going to be putting some details in there.
You're killing me, Tom. Now
You gotta have people in there. You gotta have.
I
you
know, I know, I know. It
Oh,
just
okay.
now you want ice water down here.
Yeah.
So,
That- Wow.
no, I know.
So-
That's how you start off. You know, a couple of months ago, I got to see Bernie's layout during the convention. And you may think you're finished, but
Mm.
yeah, it just goes on. Yeah, I got so much to do. But honestly, you know, like my mother and niece made about 100 telegraph poles for me like 5 years ago or
Wow.
6 years ago. They want to know when the poles are going up.
Oh, geez.
And so, you know, when you're doing 7 square feet of roof on it, you know, that's going to be the last thing that goes up. But yes, I got all sorts of other details to tend to as far as, you know, people and loads.
Right.
And,
In terms of big projects, I guess the only one remaining for you is the stone fort, right?
well, I'm underway on the stone fort. Let me,
We'll get that
yeah,
another time for sure.
I'm working on my copper loads coming from Ducktown, Tennessee. That copper was eventually taken to Memphis, where they actually cast a few cannon in Memphis. So it kind of provides a lot. Yeah, the stone fort, the machine shop. I got to do, you know, car bills and roundhouse bills. So I got plenty to do.
Charlie, how much overhang, if you recall, did you decide on?
It's 2 feet.
Scale 2 feet?
Yeah.
And okay, that sounds right.
Yeah. And so I think the actual, you know, the plywood hangs over about 1/4 inch on the drip line. The projection of the dollhouse trim, I think is okay, it's 1500s, and then I overhang the metal shingle past the dollhouse trim by 10,000.
Uh-huh.
Or no, yeah, no, I'm sorry, 1/10 of an inch, yeah, 100,000. So the whole thing is 1/2 inch, and it looks right too. And
Uh-huh.
yes, a big building, and it would have a decent overhang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gorgeous, Charlie. Absolutely gorgeous.
All right. Thank you, Roger.
Very amazing.
You know, Charlie, when I said I expected you to take us to the moon, I didn't mean by way of Mars, land on the moon, show me the surface, and then bring me back, okay? Well done.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, you got me thinking because
Nice building, Charlie. I'll say this, you give me a great reason to stay in HO.
Oh, George. Oh, man. Yeah, you need to come on back, George.
Yes, sir.
Hey, you sure he was a surgeon? Looks like an engineer's job to me.
Mm.
How much did that thing weigh?
Oh, not much. Not much. I mean, I can, you know, it's you're holding it out in front of you. I mean, you can't bring it in tight or you'll break the thing. And so, I mean, I can hold that by myself. Maybe the whole thing weighs 10 pounds or something like that.
Wow. That's cool.
Mhm. Maybe 15.
Do you have a switch for the lights that you just turn on and off, or how's that connected?
Yeah, so I used warm white LEDs, and I think it is perfect. You know, so it's slightly toward the yellow, and I bought a. I don't know much about LEDs yet, even though I've done my engines, you know, my locomotive install and whatnot. But so I was thinking I bought this controller for only like $10, and I was thinking I'd be able to control each building with the controller, but it has no effect on them. And so I haven't had a chance to write the company, but I'm thinking that, but anyway, right now I just, I mean, I can easily add a switch, you know, it's 8 volts
Mhm.
DC. And so I can easily add a switch. Right now I got, if you, this LED lighting you might do around the house or the kitchen or something, you know, it's got this low voltage plug. And so
Mhm.
right now I just plug it in, you know, or pull it apart. But I mean, by the time y'all get here, I'll have a switch or a controller once I figure that out.
Well, you're getting to the point where you could do some interesting low light running. You know, maybe not pitch black, but
Mhm. Well, I haven't shown y'all pictures. It's kind of hard, I think hard to capture, but that area by the tunnel and actually by the emergency trestle at Whiteside is kind of a dark part of the room. And I really didn't understand how dark it would be. I was thinking it'd be light because there's a window right above it. Well, you know, the light doesn't turn 180 degrees, it comes
Right.
back. So I've added LED lights over the tunnel area, and I've got some LED projectors lighting up the trestle. And that really helped. And you know, my son-in-law said, "Oh man, that looks so great. You ought to do that all the way around the room."
Of course.
So,
Uh,
I'm gonna think about it.
yeah. Right.
But it does look good. You know, LEDs. There's a company called Klus, KLUS, and they have an LED strip. Okay, and so the aluminum fixture that holds the strip the whole thing's only about a 1/2 inch wide. Maybe it's 5/8, but it's close to that. And the neat thing about it is you can pick different levels of this little track to use. You can use the highest slot or the middle or, you know, the most superficial slot. And then there's this long hemi-cylindrical lens. Okay, it looks like a piece of plastic trim that slides down the whole length of this LED strip. But if you're getting ready to build a layout and you're looking for, you know, lighting or valance lighting or whatnot, this thing is killer because you, depending on where you put your LED strip and where you mount your lens, this plastic strip, you can exactly illuminate 30 degrees, 60 degrees, 90 degrees. And
Wow.
it literally, and so I've got mine adjusted so it just hits the front edge of the layout and it just hits the top of the backdrop and everything else is dark. So, I mean, it's like being in a museum, but it's a real interesting way to light layout. And I wish I had done it all the way around, but I didn't know about it.
Yeah. Vince just posted a link to that Klus lighting.
Look, okay, yeah. Have you looked at that, Vince?
It's museums. I never thought you can use like high-end retail shops and things like that. I didn't know you can use it for railroads, but you did.
Yeah.
Like jewelry and some
Right.
pictures and
Right.
and also it's interesting that you picked yellow because I think they tend to be more, well, I don't know. I guess it depends what you're trying to do. I think you picking yellow is of course right for what we're talking about here, but sometimes they try to make it more blue or kind of the bright white. I don't know, warm white is no cold white, cool white.
Yeah,
I
no,
think 'cause it plays different on the colors. I mean, you can't go by that because they have different objectives for
Right.
these stores. Yeah.
well, if you really want to go after it, you know, other people beside Klus sell it, but you can get an LED strip that goes, you know, there's 3 different colors on there. And then you have a controller that it can give you the color you want.
That's
And,
the other thing.
So I just kind of crossed my fingers and went with the warm white, and I think it's fine.
I think you picked the right one for what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
I mean, what would they have had? Oil lamps or something like that back
Yeah.
then?
Right.
No whale oil?
On the Thunder Mesa videos,
Yeah.
the guy who does those will intersperse flickering LEDs with it to give a flickering effect from an oil lamp, which
There you go, Charlie.
nice touch.
God. Right. I actually, they have flickering, and they also have breathing.
Breathing?
And breathing is just this kind of, slow.
Like a sine wave.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ramping up. It's a nice effect because
Yeah.
for work we do LED things, and the breathing versus blinking.
Right.
Flickering, I think, is usually don't put flickering in electronic things that we do, but flickering makes sense too. But breathing is very nice. It's a ramp up and ramp down.
So
Very nice.
I bought some breathing and some flickering LEDs in warm white, and I can go under the table and I can drop one of the light tubes, and I may have some fun and switch it out, and maybe just put one flickerer and one breather
Mhm.
in the whole
Awesome.
roundhouse, just to give you something like that. So
Give a little effect.
So what they normally do is they'll have 3 elements and they'll mix it RGB, I guess, and they'll mix it to get the different colors.
right.
And you might have a light pipe or something like that, because maybe you can't put the light exactly, the LED exactly where you want it. I'm talking about, in an electronic product, not talking about a railroad. So if you had something like that, and then the ramp up and ramp down, well, that's just firmware, but you can't do everything.
Like
But yeah, breathing is a very nice effect, but I'm not sure how it would apply here. I think it's probably more flickering.
Mhm.
I mean, what would be causing breathing in like if you're updating a product or something, you want to show activity. A lot of times people don't like blinking because it's alerting you to something, like something's not right.
right.
So breathing is more pleasant, going up and down slowly. It's more pleasant to show you some activity.
Well, the nice thing on these LEDs in the roundhouse is they're up so high in the roundhouse, you cannot see the bulb.
Mhm.
So whatever flicker effect or breathe effect is
Right.
because it's reflecting off the walls and the ground and whatnot. And I think it'll take the edge off it a little
Sure.
bit.
I like what Tom put in his locomotives with the flickering. I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh yeah,
When you showed your video a couple of weeks ago. That was
Firebox.
Yeah.
George the
Yeah.
Great ought to chime in on this, no pun intended, on Firebox flicker, because I tell you, their decoders are just all over that Firebox flicker.
Yeah, that and the headlamps. That I tell you, those little subtleties are just it pulls you right into the whole experience of being there.
I mean, maybe for a roundhouse, it might be something like over a period of time, some lights would go on or off just because people working. I don't know. But, that's pretty hard to do. Maybe it wouldn't, maybe some would flicker, but like you say, you can't really see it because you're not
Well-
looking at individual light. You're looking at the overall effect.
Right.
Like in a house or something, not all the lights are on at the same time. House, lights you illuminate different rooms at different times.
I guess it depends.
So
on-
I'll add into that really quickly. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Jerry, what's his name that does the videos on Model Railroader, did a whole video on having lights turn on and off in a house, and he used an Arduino. And if I remember right, he said there's actually programs that have already been written that do that. So you wouldn't even have to do the coding.
Yes, I would agree with that. I would agree there'd be a library you could pick. You probably have
There's
more
also a
choices
product
than,
out there. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, there's probably more things you can do than you could ever want to do. That would come down to.
No, that's it.
The Arduino clinic at NMRA saved my life in figuring out how to do that. At the national.
George?
But that was where I found about all the pro sitting out there.
So if any of you have a like an Amazon Echo Dot or one of those, just take one of those apart. Well, if you really want to get involved, take one of those apart or get an old one and open it up. All the thought that's put into not just the LEDs, but they put black and the way they have the plastic around it and everything to give the best effect of the light. But you know, we're talking about model railroad here, not a consumer product.
George?
Sorry, I walked away for a moment. What I was going to say is if you want to change lights and things like that, NCE makes a product called the Illuminator, and you can pick different lighting effects. You can use it for signaling, which is, of course, isn't anything we'd use here. But in the case of like changing lights in the house, I have it on a couple of buildings on my layout where it changes from room to room, and you can just pick it, turn on and off randomly. So at least it looks like there's some life inside there.
Or another thing, if you have like a stamp mill or something and you want to show you have sound going with it. I mean, that you're getting, that's more like the Disney guy again, but you have sound with the light. Right. So there's some sound, there's some activity in the light. If there's a forge or whatever, it's a burst of light. I don't know what it is. A steel mill, I don't know. Where they're kind of mixing the two of them together to create an effect. I guess you call that animation at that point.
There you go.
Yeah.
There's a company called ITT Products makes small little standalone sound modules that you can trigger with on and off lighting outputs. They just need some sort of power into it. So you can trigger sound effects to come along with certain lighting effects and things like that. Just depends on how you want to go. But the reason I mentioned the NCE was because where the Arduino, you have to learn how to use it, program it, and do all that stuff. The NCE thing is already kind of pre-built and ready to go, and it supports the manufacturer.
Mhm.
Yeah, you want a library that you can tell it what you want. I
One
think-
thing I like on my, I have a 4x4 layout. And so for the night sky, I got a bunch of fiber optics and I stick them in a bulb, just use a regular like shrink tube to put on the end of the bulb. And most of them are solid, but then I intersperse with different kind of blinking and so on. So the sky's mostly steady, but occasional lights. And then on another backdrop, what I did is I have a board and I just drilled a bunch of holes in it. And then I have the lights behind it. I don't know
Right.
which I like better yet. They're different.
Yep. Yep, that's a nice effect.
Didn't John Allen do something where he had the paint, his phosphorus paint or something? I was talking about 50s and 60s, but he had paint that he used and like a black light or something.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they're aged photos you see nowadays, but the effect seemed like he was very effective. He didn't have, you can imagine if he had LEDs. So
Well, I've seen somebody take a one small little dot of fluorescent paint and put it on like on a tree and all that, and then in the background had a UV LED in the background pulsating, so it was mimicking in, I think, N scale a firefly.
That's insane.
Oh, God.
There you go, Joel.
Now,
Thanks,
I have a question about the roundhouse. It might be because I might be a little bit too far north of the Mason-Dixon line. But I noticed that there's no doors on it. Was that how the prototype was?
I can't see any doors from the picture. And, yeah, I imagine a roundhouse is a pretty warm place. I mean, especially if you got several locomotives in there, but right. There are no doors. And you actually get a pretty good look at the one in Huntsville, and there doesn't seem to be any doors.
I'm assuming because it's a little bit warmer than the Delaware and Hudson is.
Maybe.
Come on down to Memphis in August and you'll find out about that. That's right.
The W&A roundhouse did have doors, and I don't know the rationale behind that, given, what we're saying about the warmth down there. But there's that one photo one of Bernard's photos and you see the doors kind of open, or one's open and one's closed. I don't know about Savannah. I don't remember them. They didn't have doors, I don't think. Anybody remember Savannah that was there?
Um,
You mean currently or when it was in regular use?
There's that one section that's the original section. And I thought back then they might have had doors. Yeah, you
Yeah.
did. Okay.
Yeah, they had doors on because of the weather. All different extremes of weather would prevent you from being able to use it year round if you couldn't close it in.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's one of the future meets that we're going to do. We're just going to focus on prototype roundhouses, and I'll collaborate with Charlie and David on that one. Anybody else that wants to be involved, let me know.
Yeah, because Alexandria's is a roundhouse.
Right.
And the smaller 5-stall, I have found nothing that shows the front of it, just the back. Over at Quartermaster Depot on the U.S. Military Railroad on the tracks that run to DC, there's a small roundhouse from the Alexandria Loudon in Hampshire. And that's a small 5-stall roundhouse with an outside turntable. But all of the photographs that pick it up and the artwork that picks it up has it from the street side, not from the inside, not from the far side.
Okay.
So I don't know whether it had doors or not. I would assume it probably did, because the Alexandria Roundhouse, every entrance into it is closed.
Right. Right.
I don't have it in front of me, but I think the couple of photos from the Civil War of the Nashville, I don't think it showed doors either. I don't think any of the stalls were closed.
Interesting.
I'll go back and look at that.
And there's also the question of when the roundhouse was built and how close it was to the front in the war. Doors might be more of a priority when you got the cavalry roaming around somewhere near there or something.
Well, yeah, and the roundhouse, I do know that the roundhouse in Alexandria was not completed because the shots of the Alexandria Yard in the National Collection were taken when the cupola was completed on the top of the roundhouse and the roof was finished. And that was when Andrew Russell went up, took his camera and did the series of panoramic. And that is in the Alexandria City Historian Office collection of papers as the documentation on that, just the general parts there. So I would assume north, yes, south, maybe less up.
I remember seeing an article, now this is way out of period, but it was a diesel engine house in Texas that didn't even have walls. It was just the roof. Because I'm assuming it was really hot in that specific area.
Kleber shops.
I forgot what the article was, and I even forgot which magazine it was in.
Well, I'm thinking that's the Cleburne shops, maybe. Santa Fe's. I seem to recall a building like that.
But it also goes to show you that depending on the location depends on how it's built, how it's built. I mean, I know I live here in
you can't see the roof, but he made the roof.
Say again, Robert?
That's okay. Go ahead, Ed.
I mean, I live here in Arlington, Vermont, and it's very close to South Dorset, which they had a lot of marble quarries. And there is a house that's in the area that is completely marble. And it looks, the thing is, it sounds impressive, but if you look at it, it looks like it was made from all the scraps that were defects. So I mean, it's a very haphazard, building and all that, but it's completely marble.
Huh. Cool. Good.
So I'm assuming the same thing as with not only design, but also building materials also. I mean, with different places, I mean, some places might have more wood than, but other places might have more stone available or bricks.
A lot of the oldest homes in Memphis, the bricks were made on site. Literally, when they dug the clay for the basement, I think the colliers, the guys good with coke and coal and whatnot, they would actually make bricks on site, as far as using local material.
Yeah, I think they did that a lot down in the South in general. I think that's where they, in order to build a lot of the structures down there, was local production.
Yeah, I think in the early years, probably that's a thing, because I remember in Albany, New York, when they were talking about their oldest buildings that were built by the Dutch. They were, I think they were, at that time, it's like Albany was known as, I think, the Beverwick. And at that time it was the whole area, I think, was less than a square mile. So it's, and back then it was considered wilderness, which is now, deep in heart of downtown.
All right, gentlemen. Any news bulletins, any other comments?
Well, I just added a note. There was another company, I think they were in Australia, that they use fiber optic lights. So another option. I have no experience with it, but I thought it was interesting.
Oh, Dwarven?
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been to a couple of train meets. They have quite a interesting setup. A lot of modern stuff.
Yeah, that's what I would think. I would think it would be more modern, but who knows? Maybe you can find some, have a battlefield and you have, active fire. Who knows? You can disperse a lot of lights and trees. Who knows? Maybe find something interesting for it.
Yeah.
One of my favorite suppliers is Evan Designs. They also have a thing for making buildings. That's like a program where if you want to make cardstock and so on, but they're LEDs, they got real big, small stuff, flashing, blinking. And you can call up, they're really good at tech support. And that's, I made my fireflies, but they're like smallest fiber optics, and then a thing that rotates it so you can have it look random. And they have a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, my LEDs are by Evan Designs. Well, they do a nice job, and they also had the longest leads. They had that 14-inch lead, and
you can get custom longer if you need it.
Yeah.
So is anyone? Go ahead.
I do have a question of you were talking about earlier about night doing stuff in the nighttime and all that. How did they do nighttime operations around this time? I would assume they would have some kind of lighted signal
On the track?
Well, I mean, for I know they have semaphores for the daytime, but what will they use at night?
I don't think they had that much traffic that they needed to worry about it. There wasn't a lot of night running. Even in the 1880s, you didn't have that many night trains.
The rule book usually says you sit until you finish the meet.
Right.
I know in those two books, one by Bell and the other one Train Running for the Confederacy, they talked about Because there was a lot of night running during the war because there were so many trains to move,
Yeah.
munitions or what have you, that at a certain point they'd send a flagman out with a lantern either to the front,
Yes.
and in some cases they hung a lantern on the back of the train, just to warn any approaching. So yeah, if you wanted to do something like rig a light on the back of your train, that's a possibility. But it was, from what I understand, mostly during the war that a lot of the nighttime running was done.
Yeah,
Of course.
the U.S. military railroad cabooses all have light boxes,
That's right.
Conductor cars, yeah.
and the front, you had lights on the front, and it tells you what colors to run.
Mm. That's the US.
Just like your flags.
Wait, front of the train or front of the conductor car are you talking?
In the back of the train, in the caboose, but that's U.S. military railroad record says caboose in 63.
Oh,
Really, it does?
Yeah. Yes, the car reports identify flat cars, box cars, cabooses, dock cars, wrecking car, and passenger car. So I kind of went with that and said, yeah, that. Just a minute, and that is not contradicting all those other stories. The word caboose had to come into use at some point because it eventually took over for conductor car.
Do you know the origin of the caboose, Joel?
I've heard several stories.
Oh,
In general, caboose is your last car, but and then they had
okay.
office cars,
Was that
hospital cars.
Did the English design the caboose and that's where we got it? No. Where,
The English called them brake fans.
John? Where'd that come from?
It-
Where?
Well, that's where the brake crew hung out. I'm saying there's a lot, every word that comes up comes into use at some point. And the problem always is in the 1840s, 50s, and 60s, not many books written on what things were being called.
That's true. But to get back to the original one, they
But they
did
had a light,
sometimes.
had a light back there. If you look in the pictures
Yeah,
of those cars, they all have a light box in the front and the back.
yeah. And also, as you were saying, on the engines, there was often a spot you could hang a
There's two-
lantern on either side, just like
Yes.
you'd have flags during the day.
Right, and at night you would have the lanterns. The lanterns are higher.
Right.
Usually higher. You usually see the hooks up higher for the lanterns, and you have a headlight.
Right.
But the lanterns on the front tell you the information of what's behind.
Like the
I assume the light boxes on the conductor cars, whatever, you only use the one in the back, and that way you could just have it either direction, but you wouldn't have both running, would you? Front and back of the caboose.
No, you don't. It has it on both ends of the car, depending on which way is the
Yeah,
back of the
okay.
train.
Right.
Because you're not going to turn them. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
The boxes were set up so you could just put a lantern in them. You
Yes.
know, so you
The
could
box-
take it from the one end of the
box
car,
all the way
drop
back.
it to the other and put it in.
Okay.
And if you look in lots of the pictures, you'll see that box. The L&N yard where they've got like 5 cars.
That's
Every
right.
one of them has boxes on top. So I just find that interesting that in those things. The other thing too is we have like DC's rule book, but you know that with the 40 some odd railroads that came under the operation, there had to be a lot of different rule books.
Yeah.
Because they took over railroads in occupied areas. I think there's only one in Gettysburg. They took over one other railroad to clean up operations on it because it was jamming up. But in general, you had to have lots of different sections, and not all of those. The records that we have on the U.S. Military Railroad, for the most part, are from Alexandria, and those were the ones that Brevet Major General McCollum boxed up and sent to the quartermaster archives. And the quartermaster archives were then turned over to the National Archives. Because your other, AHIC has some other records I found when I was up there. The Army Historic Institute at Carlisle has some written reports by people as opposed to the technical reports that ended up in the archives, and the telegraphs and counts of cars and those things. The telegraph records, the comebacks.
Now, when did the cupola start to be putting on conductor cars or cabooses?
It's the car on the back of the train. When trains started getting longer.
Okay.
I mean,
Year-wise, it was about 1870. They
Yeah.
started putting cupolas on.
Okay.
You know, addressing Edward's question about nighttime running, even before the war, I mean, one of the things about the Memphis and Charleston, when it was completed in the 1850s, it was the longest railroad in the world, you know, at like 260 miles or something like that. But just even routine passenger service between Memphis and Chattanooga during the winter would involve nighttime running, you know, of 2 to 4 hours, something like that. So, I mean, they try to get the bulk of the run during daylight, but they routinely were running at night or in the dark.
Well, I had a question left over from last time. I had heard that that Sam Hill was a surveyor back in the 1830s, very popular. He used to come in the bars at night and tell incredibly great stories, but he always cussed a lot. So when you want to tell his jokes in polite company, you couldn't say those words, but it's part of what made it good. So when people say, like, what in the Sam Hill? Everybody knew substitute, you know, a bad word in there. But then there was an engine called the Sam Hill. So has anybody heard traditions on where what in the Sam Hill comes from?
Oh, Lord.
Sam Hill tradition.
So that's the origin of that. Interesting.
And well, I thought, well, maybe that engine or whatever it was that the guy showed last time when he did that presentation, maybe they named the engine after him and it's the same guy. I don't know.
No idea.
Well, that was me that showed the locomotive last week. And that Sam Hill was an engineer on the probably the DT and I. It was a favorite of Henry Ford's, and he named the locomotive after him.
Okay, gentlemen, I think we'll call it a night. Charlie Taylor, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Charlie.
Appreciate
Fantastic
it.
work.
Yeah, great job, Charlie.
Can't wait to see the changes. Great railroad.
Yes, nicely done, Charlie.
We now know we're all amateurs.
All right. I'm not sure if we'll have one in 2 weeks, but that's the plan unless something gets in the way. So stay tuned and I'll keep you posted. Great to see you all. Stay well.
Same to you, sir.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Good night now.
Right.
It's moving fast.
Oh, God.
John's gone.
Y'all have a good night.
You too, David.
Take care, David.
Take care, Alan.
Same to you guys. Thank you.
Hey, night, Alan.
Good night now. DC, my layout is up. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later.
Once I can figure out how to shut this thing off. God, I know.